For problem 1.4, we're now looking at the third type of symmetry. We've looked at rotation symmetry, we've looked at reflection symmetry, and now we want to look at translation symmetry. And in translation symmetry, we're generally looking at what we call strip patterns or wallpaper patterns, where we take an image and we just repeat it over and over again, either right next to where it originally was in some cases, so it's just straight in line with itself, as in these first two images, or in the case of this third one, where the image may be in line one direction and then shifted. In other words, we've kind of moved it down to the right in a consistent way, and then the next strip is actually up back in line with the original shape. So these are called translations, because literally what we're just doing is taking the image and sliding it down or up or left or right. So it stays with its original position, original shape, and then the position only changes its location. There's no reflection symmetry, there's no rotation symmetry in this case, although there can be combinations of those in the cases we're going to look at here. Initially, we're just going to take a basic design element, for instance the bicycle in this case, and we're going to translate it around the page in a consistent manner where it's predictable. It's not just randomly placed around the page. And so we call these translations. So the slide movements from one position to the next, they are called translations. So we're going to specifically look now at this idea of sliding something from one position to another. Those movements are called translations, and this is going to be looking for translation symmetry. If you can slide the whole design to a position where it looks exactly as it did in its original position, then we have a translation, and we use arrows to describe those movements. The basic design element is what we're looking for at first, so we're given a basic design element, and then we want to be able to tell whether the design has translation symmetry. We tell where it has moved to. So we're going to go right into the first problem, first part of this problem in 1.4 in translation symmetry. Now, oftentimes in certain sort of cultures and art, they use a basic design element, and then that design element becomes the basis for a pattern that's continued over and over and over again. So in problem 1.4a, we actually have a basic design element from the Mayan people of Central America, and that basic design element you can see on the page there. If I start with that basic design element, and I'm going to just copy it here on my paper, so I start with this shape, and then I continue it. So the idea is to make a strip pattern that this would continue just as it is with this basic design element repeated over and over again. So there's a second one, and then continue. If I take that basic design element again and just repeat it over and over again, and then it becomes the basis of this pattern that really is a translation. It has translation symmetry because I'm simply just taking the same image and translating it directly to the next space. See, each of these is a direct translation. Finish this one. And so the original image is just translated to the right directly from one location to the next. And so that answers question A. So I just drew a repeat image of that. Now if we look at B, we have this image, this wallpaper, and it extends in every direction. And the question is, what's the basic design element? What's the part that's we use to repeat or print over and over and over again? And there's several ways to look at this. I'm going to try to do this in a couple different ways. I'm going to use my transparency paper so I can trace. So if you think about each of these squares, like this square right here, is a basic design element. And if you think about the parts inside the square, these little parts of the flower, if I were just to take that image, this square, and repeat it over and over again, I can just move this around. You can see I can slide it. I'm going to slide it down to the right, or I could slide it directly left, down. So there's a couple different movements that I can make with it in order to move it into direct places. I can go down to the right, down to the right. So that's one way to look at the basic design element of this piece of wallpaper by using the squares. Another way to look at it is if I were to just kind of take midpoints here, like halfway there, halfway there, halfway there, halfway there. If I were to take kind of a square out of the middle part of this and think about that shape right there. That shape is a part of a basic design element. In fact, in some cases there would be two parts to this. There would be that piece and this piece. And so you can think of breaking this up into different pieces of the design. Now, with this one, the problem is it creates two images, and so I can't just take this and stamp it here. So I would take actually both of these together. I would have to take this piece and this piece together, and that could be my basic design element. And I could take that and move it over here and move it down to the right. And so again, it would be another way to look at, I could just take this piece that I had cut out and move it right to there, and I would have that same piece. So there's another way to look at the basic design elements that you have of the image. So that's one part, one piece of that image that I could take and do that. So there's several ways to look at basic design elements. If this was my basic design element, and that's the part I'm stamping over and over again, or if I take the entire square and stamp that over and over again, or there are even some other kind of alternate ways to look at it. These are probably the most obvious ways to see the basic design elements. So when we're talking about translation symmetry, I would want to be able to describe movements. In this case, movement would be in that direction or left to right. So we have two different directions that we translate, either up or over. Or we could even say we go down or left. So depending upon which way we want to translate that image. And that's how translation symmetry works. If we were to describe precisely how the basic design element can be copied and translated to produce the pattern, then we want to say, well, we start with this image and we move it up to the right and over to the right, or to the left and down to the right. We have to do it in two directions. If we only do it one way, we'd have to actually describe that we're going to move it down and over as well. So we've got to cover the whole page by moving it in multiple directions. We have to cover all of these different spaces with this. So stamping it over and over again, left to right, up and down, will give us a copy of the basic design element.